Welcome to this session to gain new business insights with Zoho Analytics. My name is Christopher Mowers. I am the Zoho Developer Team Lead at AspenTech CRM. Analytics is one of the areas, one of the applications, and also just one of the conceptual areas that I work in as a developer and as a consultant. I am a certified Zoho Analytics associate. I've passed certification exams for Zoho Analytics. I also specialize in the area of database and data analytics, one of my major concentrations professionally. And I also previously worked as a director of operations in the retail coffee space before I worked in software. And that, for me, brings both a passion and a knowledge for how data can be used in a business, and makes me particularly excited to speak to you all about how Zoho Analytics can work for your business and about how business intelligence in general can work for your business. So I've said business intelligence a couple times now. Let's talk a little bit about Zoho Analytics as well as business intelligence, and I'll give you a little bit of an overview of how we're going to approach this today. So first, what is Zoho Analytics? Zoho Analytics is a business intelligence platform that exists in the Zoho ecosystem of applications. Those of you who have Zoho One definitely have analytics. Various other Zoho packages may or may not include analytics, or you may have it or consider it as a standalone application. The way that Zoho Analytics works in general is that it copies data from other data sources, and those could be other Zoho applications, such as Zoho CRM. Those could also be external data sources, be them databases, or it could be even files on your computer. It could also be other applications for which Zoho has built an integration, non-Zoho applications for which Zoho has built an integration. And what Zoho Analytics does with all the copies of all that data is it provides tools for you, mostly drag and drop style tools, so that users can learn about their business. And so what we're going to cover today is a little bit more about the idea of business intelligence in general, how users who are not necessarily members of the sort of traditional information technology or information systems organizations can leverage tools like Zoho Analytics to learn about their businesses. That's what it's all about. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And then I want to broadly demo for you lots of things that Zoho Analytics can do. We're not going to go too deep on like how to build a particular style of report or how to build a particular style of dashboard. We're really going to go more into the kinds of things that analytics can do and where you might get started. So let's talk just a little bit more about business intelligence before we dive in. There's this idea of data, and there's this other idea of information. And you hear the term data thrown around a lot. Of course, we all think about data privacy, data insights, data mining. Data is at the forefront of our minds right now. And we know too that your businesses probably have a lot of data at this point. Most of us now are using various information systems that store a lot of data. But data is not necessarily information. And the key difference between data and information is that information is meaningful. Information allows you as business operators, as executives, as managers to learn about your business, to actually make informed decisions about your business, and to do so in a way that you might not have been able to do if you were in a position where you had to rely on your intuition alone. I'm sure that many of you have outstanding business intuition, no doubt, but nevertheless, sometimes our intuitions fail us. And being able to leverage the data that's already out there, converting that data into information can make us that much better, that much more productive, or that much better at revenue generation or cost management or any of those things that you might have to worry about. And business intelligence in particular is about putting analytical tools in the hands of business users. Like I said, outside of the traditional IT or IS organization, you don't need necessarily to be a wizard at writing SQL queries, although it helps, but you don't need to be able to use analytics. It's a lot of drag and drop style tools. So for that reason, you can do rapid development of reports. You can build the reports you need. You don't need to necessarily rely on some other expert to build for you reports and go through rounds of revisions and things like that. The other key advantage of analytics is that it provides a unified BI platform. And so there's tremendous power in the aggregation of your data. If you're using Zoho CRM for sales and you're using Zoho Desk or Zendesk or something like that for any kind of quality control, and if you're using even Excel on someone's computer to manage some other process, all of these things can be brought together, and then at the intersection of those various data sources, you can see results that you wouldn't necessarily see only looking at a single one of those data sources. I'll show you some examples of that today. Finally, a huge advantage of a cloud-based BI platform such as Zoho Analytics is that if you're pointing to data sources from analytics, then as those data sources change, your various components, your reports, your dashboards, your KPI tools, those will update with your data. I know I used to spend a lot of time making updates to an Excel spreadsheet, importing data, massaging it, reformatting it, writing Excel formulas, things like that. With Zoho Analytics, once it's set, when the data changes, then your informational representations change to be accurate. And that can be a tremendous time savings, I know, and a headache reliever. So these are all the reasons why business intelligence tools such as Zoho Analytics can be tremendously powerful and tremendously useful for business users. So talking about that, you might have the question, well, where should I start then? This is something I think about whenever I'm talking about analytics with clients. Where do we start? It's massive. The potential, the power, the feature set is massive. So even user-friendly tools like Zoho Analytics can be difficult to get into, to get started. You open it up, you look at it, you're like, okay, I see my tables from CRM, great, but what do I do here? I think the key for me anyway is that BI and Zoho Analytics in general are designed to be ad hoc by nature. Jumping into your analytics area and starting to think about, okay, I need these 5 reports and they need to be perfect and look exactly a certain way. I think it's challenging. I think it'll be easier for you to start thinking about what's one thing that I need and how might I start to look at that data. And then as you work in an ad hoc fashion, you can start to figure out, okay, now I need to formalize this report, right? And now this is going to be a report that I use and I save. But it starts with curiosity. I think that's the key really to business intelligence and to gaining insights in your business with a tool like Zoho Analytics is to simply be curious. What's something about your business that you don't feel confident that you really understand, or you suspect you might even be wrong about? And how might you start to pull data into reports to confirm something for you, or to prove or disprove something? What do you want to know? You start with rough ad hoc reports, and then you work towards polishing them. And tools like analytics are great for this, because building a simple report does not require a huge investment of time. Like any tool, there is an investment of learning, of course, right? But the drag and drop nature does keep that relatively to a minimum compared to the reporting tools of the past decade. Tools like this make it so that you can jump in and with a decent sense of intuition in the program, you can really get pretty far. So that's where we're coming from today. I want to jump into a little bit of a featured demo here. I'm going to show you a sample company that I've set up, some different data sources, some reports and dashboards and filters and just different things that you can do here. Let me pull up my demo. Okay, so this is what Zoho Analytics looks like when you first come into it. You can see these are all various tables that have synced from my demo CRM. We also have some Zoho Desk data sources, and we have some additional tables here. So what can we do with all this? One thing I recommend, the first thing you do, if you haven't done anything in analytics yet, is actually to try out Zia. Zia is Zoho's essentially AI chatbot. You can ask Zia questions, Zia will help you out. Now, Zia functionality sort of varies from Zoho application to Zoho application, but in analytics, I have found it to be quite good, and I've found it to be quite good in particular to start somewhere. If I'm curious about something, but I don't quite know how to frame this report, just starting with Zia can be a really great way to do it. So I've got a couple here. This is a sales organization. They've got some invoices in Zoho CRM, and that's how they're measuring revenue. So if I just start by what is the amount by product name? And you can see when I typed amount, that's a field name. You would expect to sort of see your CRM fields here. This can be tuned, and I'll talk about that more later on. So if my query language feels a little bit awkward, know that there is some flexibility and some ability to configure here. What is the amount by product name? You can see that's from products. So if I just ask that question, you can see right away, oh, this is interesting. I get, this amount is retail sales, this amount is project work, this is amount support services. That's pretty nice, but I think I would rather see this like in a pie chart format. And so you can, like I said, this is a starting point. You can start here, you can edit this. Here's a report definition. You could have gotten here by building it, but here we are already. I just changed the type to a pie chart. I've got percentages here. I've got dollar amounts here. I can add a filter relatively easily here if I wanted to filter by like invoice date. Sorry. You can search for these. Here's invoice date. You can see the default is a date range. I think that'll be pretty nice. And so I jump into view mode. Here's my 3 categories. You could add labels, certainly. You can set a range of like, let's say I wanted to do, I don't know, 2 years ago maybe to today. You can see the mix changes only ever so slightly in that case. I think that's probably most of my data in this demo. But you can see I built, this could use some work, but I built a relatively professionally looking report that will update from my data sources dynamically in a matter of just really a few minutes here. Let's say I wanted to do the same thing, but I wanted to see time as a longitudinal component. So not just my sort of mix of products here, but how that mix changes over time. Well, let's ask Zia, what is the amount by product name by invoice date, or by, let's do actually by year. I think that'll look better. Let's say by invoice date by year. Let's see, I think I can actually simplify this by year. Yeah, year, and then see it says invoice date. So it's letting you select sort of the field under the hood. Okay, we have a longitudinal component now. You can see, you can imagine sort of the mix here. But what if I wanted to see this in a stacked bar? I think a stacked bar is going to work better, because what you're missing here is kind of that pie chart sort of component, right? You're seeing the linear progression, which is nice, but you're missing kind of, it's harder to compare these relatively. Well, sure enough, analytics has a stacked bar. We go to chart types here, we can find it. Vertical stacked bar will work for me. There you go. So you get the same idea here. You can see that linear progression of your overall, but now we can also see the ratios. So that was, two reports in 3 minutes or so. Zia is a great starting place, and if you're curious about Zoho Analytics, but you feel intimidated even by dragging and dropping, which is totally normal in some circumstances, just asking questions and seeing if that gets you even 80% of the way to a report that you want to use is really a really nice feature of Zoho Analytics, and that's why I'm leading with it here, is because I think it's so helpful. So let's dive in to some more examples. I'm going to leave Zia behind here for a minute, and I'm going to pull up this dashboard that I've built that just has some various components here, and I'll kind of talk about how all this can be used. So this is a dashboard. Zoho Analytics has this dashboard building tool. You can see I have tabs here. I have filters at the top. These filters can be applied universally to all components, or you can also exclude components from the filters. So like, let's say you had, I don't know, some like current month, current quarter, current year kind of components, and then the rest of it was more generic. You might exempt those current month, current quarter, and current year components from a date filter, for example, right? Because that wouldn't make sense to use the date filter on those ones. The date for those is fixed. But anyway, I built this because I wanted to present a variety of ways that this data can be used. So our data sources here are Zoho CRM, which is handling primarily the sales and invoicing data, the customer data as well. We have Zoho Desk, which this company is using to manage quality. And then we've got also an external data source, which I'll talk more about later on, but it's a database, not in Zoho, that has some sort of dummy shipment data to represent how, like, say you're using an external fulfillment tool or something like that. All of this is integrated into Zoho CRM, or into Zoho Analytics. All of it updates dynamically as often as every 3 hours. And we can use it. So this is a simple sales dashboard. You can see we have various KPI components. You can set goals. You can set your date ranges for these. A lot of things are possible. But these are nice just to throw at the top of a dashboard, especially if there's something you're monitoring. Just have it at the top and monitor it. You can see our sales by month. This is a company that grew rapidly in the fourth quarter of 2020, as you can see, and then continued to grow. You see our overall trend there. And we've just got some other sales tabular data, right? Now I want to show you one feature that these kinds of charts have that I find really helpful. I'm gonna go into edit mode and edit this. Let's talk for a moment about forecasting. Some of you are Zoho CRM users, I know, and you're probably familiar with the forecasting tools that Zoho has on deals. And it's pretty effective, but it's also a pretty simple strategy, right? It's you map out your stages. You say, at this stage, I think we're 20% likely to close the deal. At this stage, maybe we're 80% likely. At a certain stage, close one, we're 100% likely. It takes the percentages that you set, it multiplies it against the amount of the deal, and uses that as a forecasting tool, right? And that's a good approach, but it's really a basic approach. Analytics has some statistical methods for finding lines of best fit and for finding forecasts, and we can access that in the analysis tool. And so this is just my sales data. But you can see I can bring in a trend line. It's going to go off of the sum of the grand total. That's what makes sense here. Now, you've got all sorts of statistical models for trend lines. I recommend auto unless this is something you really want to dive into. What's nice to see this is not that you're necessarily going to use it, but to know that this kind of multi-model approach is what's happening under the hood here in Zoho Analytics. This is it's a statistically sound approach to the prediction of data. Some other options here. I'm going to include I'm going to do the forecast in another example here. So for now, we'll just show our trend line. And you can see, I think that this is probably, this first part of the curve is not significant because we're just starting out. But you can see we had a sharp increase, and then it flattened out, even dipped a little, and then we're increasing again. Now, on a graph like this, or on a chart like this, maybe that's fairly obvious. But what's nice about being able to bring in trend lines like this is I'll show you some other examples where it's not so obvious. Likewise with the forecast, we can add a forecast here. We can do the next 5 months, and it will use our previous data according to various statistical models to predict our revenue for the next, in this case, 5 months, because that's what I chose. And so you have this at your disposal if you have Zoho Analytics. Today, you could go pull up your deals or your invoices or whatever represents revenue to you, and you could forecast this without having to do anything complicated in terms of understanding the type of statistics or the type of programming or anything like that that happens under the hood here. Back to our dashboard. I want to show you another example. You can see I have some more trend lines here. And what's interesting about this one here is I've got a few accounts. And you see that overall, it seems like my accounts are moving in the upward direction. But Felt's printing service is in sharp contrast to that. And I set this up as a demo on purpose that way, of course, but that's an interesting thing to me, right? Like if you're curious about your business and you know that your revenue has been climbing like crazy, but then you look at this one account and something is off there, you might not know why. I mean, depending on your role, depending on your relationship, you might not know why, and that might make you curious. Let's do this. Let's filter out these others. Oh, I'm in edit mode. Sorry. Let me go back to view mode. Let's filter out these others and look at Felt only. We can do that with these filters at the top of the dashboard. And so we can see this sharp descent here. It's maybe more obvious with only the account. And so we might want to understand why. Well, I have this sales and quality tab here, and this is what I was referring to one example of what I was referring to when I said the intersection of your various data sources has tremendous power that is hard to access if you're dealing with those data sources sort of one at a time in their own silos, versus bringing them into a place like this. So in a place like Zoho Analytics here, I actually have a link between my desk tickets and my CRM accounts and my CRM sales for that matter. And so if tickets are a measure of quality, we can maybe make the assumption in this company's case that a high volume of tickets could be indicative of an issue with quality, right? Not a sure thing, but it seems like a fair assumption. You can see in general that my tickets year over year are up. Maybe not a surprising thing with a company that has grown as much as this one has. Growing pains are normal. But let's filter down to felts. And here we see a dramatic increase in the year-over-year tickets. We see a dramatic decrease, not as dramatic, but nevertheless 27% down is pretty significant in year-over-year sales. You see too, this average days to close seems to be moving in at least a polynomial, if not exponential, rate of growth, certainly greater than linear. And so this doesn't necessarily tell you what's happening in that account, but it does tell you that something is probably happening, right? And so these sorts of analytical tools serve as a lot of times the starting point. And then we can go to desk itself and look at the tickets, right? Or we can call or email that customer or whatever our processes are in our own business. But we can see something's going on here. I wanted to point out too, like if you look at the sales by month, there's a fair amount of volatility here, right? It's and so this is where tools like the trend line can really help you out. Because I mean, yes, we can see that we started here and we had this very low month here. But when you have volatility in a report like this, adding this trend line, you can see that actually my base report here was for everyone. If I add this trend line, save it, go back to the view mode, and then I filter by felts. You can see pretty much a linear descent here, that something is not happening, and if something is not working well. And if we forecasted this out, we would likely see, continued decreases with volatility. And those predictions may be right, those predictions may be wrong, but over time, unless something changes, they're going to tend to be right? They're going to be, if things move on the same path, they're going to tend to be correct. And so even just some simple lines of best fit here, forecast patterns, can really help us to understand much more about our business. I can likewise dig into this on a broader level, showing my increased sales, like you saw, but an even more dramatic increase in tickets average days to close. And we can have these kinds of summary reports where by client we can see, they had in this month, this was their revenue, this was their number of tickets, and this is how many days on average those tickets were open, right? And so you can build these kind of drill down sort of reports too, and it makes sense to pair them on the dashboard because you're going to see probably the most general information in KPI components. You'll see sort of more longitudinal and trend kind of information and good like line graphs or stacked bars like this. And then you can see the most specific information in embedded tables. The reports also have the ability to do drill down. So if I I go more options here, you can view underlying data. And you've also got literally the lines, right? This is from my Zoho CRM invoices module. It comes into analytics as a table just like this. And things can be searched too, right? So if I searched, I don't know, 1086, which is a subject, that was a subject of the invoice, akin to like an invoice number or something like that, right? You see all this data here. So drill down capabilities are good too, and you can definitely satisfy all your curiosity, or at least most of your curiosity, starting with sort of a generic report of some kind of aggregation, averages, sums, counts, running totals, things like that. But even right here in analytics, you can get more specific. You can filter, you can search, and you can find out what you want to find out. And it gives you the tools then to go back to your team, or go back to your customer or your vendor or whomever with information, with true information, right? And not just data, but with the ability to have conversations rooted in changes in revenue, or changes in quality measures, or changes in fulfillment times, or any of those kinds of things, right? Changing gears just a little bit. I know I've mentioned a couple times I integrated an external data source here. If we go to data, I want to show you these two tables here, this account all caps and this shipment all caps. Now these are just sort of fake tables that I set up, but it simulates an external system. And in this case, the example is it's a fulfillment system. I have this account table, and it's got 4 accounts with IDs that are unique to this. They're different from the Zoho CRM IDs or the desk IDs. It's unique to this system. And then I have the shipment table, which has these IDs of the shipments matched to an account with some delivery information here. Pretty simple example, but you can imagine that many of you use information systems that have underlying databases. Some of those databases or those systems provide you access to that underlying data. This here lives on AWS today. I set up just a relational database in AWS, and so completely outside of Zoho's ecosystem. And with relative ease, I was able to use my credentials for that database to sync it. And so every 3 hours, Zoho Analytics can go read that database that exists on Amazon's data server in Ohio somewhere. And it's here for me in analytics. And now you may or may not have a cloud database, but you might have maybe a locally hosted database, which Zoho has Zoho Data Bridge, a tool you can run locally to bring in local data. You may have spreadsheets for which you can do the same. You may have tools like, if we go, you may have one of these tools here. Facebook ads, even Salesforce, QuickBooks, Stripe. All of these have integrations that Zoho has built and Zoho maintains, and they allow you to just with some credentials or with an API key or something of that nature to bring in your previously siloed data into Zoho Analytics, where you can integrate it with your other data and to gain insights. And so in my example, I used an AWS relational database. That's just one example, but you can bring in all sorts of information, all sorts of data. You can also store data in analytics. We don't see this as a very common use. Typically, people prefer to sync data from elsewhere. But should you want to have data entered right here in this application, That is also possible. And so it's very powerful. If you're using something like Microsoft Access today, you could, in most use cases, you could completely replace Microsoft Access with a tool like Zoho Analytics. Your users could come in here, they could add data, they could write queries, they could generate reports, but it's cloud hosted. You don't have to worry about access and its local files and versions and things of that nature that can get really out of hand. And so anyway, back to my example here. We've got this shipment data. And what we have to do a lot of times is we have to relate this to your CRM data. When you bring in various Zoho applications, there's a lot kind of under the hood that helps the relationships just sort of happen, and you don't have to do very much, if anything. But with external data, Zoho Analytics has to know how to relate it. There are a couple of different ways to do that, but how we typically approach it is with simple query tables. And so Zoho Analytics does have the ability to host SQL queries, and they're very powerful and very useful. Now, if SQL is outside of your area of expertise, then you could certainly leverage consultants or internal experts for something like this, but just this part of it, and then you can take it from there. So I have this table called SQL linking. And you see it's just mapping that account ID from the AWS table to the account ID from the Zoho table, to the Zoho CRM table. This is just a mapping of these two. Just if you're curious about the SQL, it's 5 lines of SQL only. It's joining on the account name. That's not always a reliable choice, but in my example, it is. So now that relationship is established, I can leverage that relationship in reporting. And so let me show you a particular example of that, as well as something pretty cool that analytics can do. This is a map of all of those shipment locations. You can do geospatial visualization in analytics. You can use a couple different fields for that. You can use a zip code. You can use lat long. You can use city state. There are different ways of doing it. But you can see the color code in here. It's grouped by the account. These are my CRM accounts. And I could bring CRM associated data here if I needed to. So you can see kind of where each account is shipping. If this was some scenario where we were working with fulfillment partners or something like that. So our accounts weren't our final destination for our products necessarily. Then you can see how that would be helpful. You can also see, as we saw the rapid growth of this company, you can see, okay, what did they do in 2019? And you can see we've got 2 accounts here. Here's where they shipped. You can add 2020. This was the year of massive growth for the company. And you can see when I zoom out this far, it looks it's pretty much just filled in. But, I can zoom in. I can, if I'm curious about a particular state, like, I don't know, like Vermont or New Hampshire here, I can dive in and see. And you can see when I hover, you see the individual data points. This one's working by latitude and longitude, but it doesn't have to be by latitude and longitude. And you could even, if you joined data together and then built this from a joined table, you could have even more information here to see by drilling down. This is just one example of geospatial visualization, right? And all of you, for your different businesses that you have, you may have different ways in which this could be helpful to you. But it's a pretty powerful tool, certainly. No. Zia is not going to give us anything there. So you can see here there are all sorts of different types. You've got heat maps, and in general, in the chart types, just many, many chart types. This is where I know in the beginning I mentioned that analytics can be, or any tool like this, not just analytics, but any tool like this can be overwhelming to get into. And so that's why, again, I just recommend approaching it with curiosity. Maybe you have a particular question that you want to know the answer to. I think you'll find just as business users that if you start wherever you're interested, if you start wherever you're curious, you'll get the pattern of how this tool works in general, and your competency in it will improve. And so it's just a matter of diving in, honestly. Now, just a reminder, I know I've said this a few times, but the data in Zoho Analytics is synced by nature. When you're looking at CRM data, when you're looking at any of these other data sources, unless the data is in analytics itself, what you're looking at is a synced copy. And so that means it's not instantaneous if there's a change in your system. But typically for these kinds of analytical processes, the live data is not as critical. And in fact, you don't necessarily want the system to react to kind of moment to moment changes. And so this allows you to have a bit of a separation between your production systems and your analytical systems. And it's just something to keep in mind as you're looking through this, that if you go make a change, it's not going to show right away necessarily. It's going to be based on how the sync has been set up. But you can sync data sources as frequently as every 3 hours. We've known people to do that. We've known a lot of people to prefer once a day. It's also possible to have manual only. So if you only want certain types of data to update when you want it to, that's also possible. That's also possible. There are a couple other key features that I'm not going to cover exhaustively in this demo because certainly I've already shown you a lot, and I don't want to distract too much from the key points here. But you can do things like share and embed in really powerful ways. If I just go to the share menu here, you can see you can share via link, you can make it public, you can embed. One of the things, if you're a Zoho CRM user, that you should definitely know is that we can actually embed analytics components as components in your CRM. They can either go on web tabs so that they're like a module, right? You click the module and it's there, or they can go on your home screen too. You can embed components in your home screen as well. And it feels very native, especially if you've got, like I showed you, this dashboard here that has these tabs, right? I could just embed this one dashboard on a web tab, and then you've got access to a lot in analytics without having to actually go to analytics. You've got it right there in your CRM. If you're a CRM user, this is a great way to do it, and we do that a lot. The nice thing about sharing in general, as we've said with other elements of this here, is if the data updates, the report updates. Unless you share, you can also share PDFs and things of that nature that are more static. But if you're sharing a live dashboard, then you don't have to worry about updating it for someone. It'll just update. You can also set alerts. You can set alerts around certain fields and get notifications. That can be a powerful thing, certainly. You can also do snapshotting. This is a relatively new feature, but is really cool. So if you've got some table here synced, you can set a frequency to snapshot that table. And so then you can actually do like date longitudinal comparisons where you might not have been able to do that before. Like, for example, in Zoho CRM, say you have, I don't know, some dollar amount on your client. And that's a field you just update manually. It's not an aggregation of different records. It's just you go to that company account, that account record, and you just update some number. Well, if I have a snapshot running every day in analytics, then I can actually see that change over time, day to day. And I can use that to generate additional insights that are not possible in CRM itself. So that's, I think, a really promising, relatively new feature that I would definitely recommend checking out. Let me bring my slides back up. Okay, so as I've said, here are key takeaways here. Do not be intimidated by the capability of analytics. I know that I showed you a lot today, but start small, start ad hoc. One of the really nice things about working in a reporting platform with data that is copied is that you really almost can't mess anything up. Now, obviously, if you have a particular report defined and you go make changes to that report, yes, you can, of course, mess that report up. But in general, if you're just starting with a new report, just clicking around, adding fields, setting filters, adding aggregations, totals, things like that, you might not get the result you wanted, but there's not going to be any negative impact to your system, right? And so it's the perfect place for experimentation. And tools like analytics are designed with that kind of experimentation in mind. And be curious. What do you want to know? The other thing I would recommend is sync as many sources as you can. Sync your CRM if you're using it. Sync any other Zoho applications if you're using them. Sync external applications if they have integrations. Try syncing your databases, your local files. Just sync it all and see what's possible. You have a row it depends on your account level, but for a Zoho One account for sure, you have a row limit of 1 million rows. And so that needs to be kept in mind, of course, or you can certainly purchase extra rows. But in general, that in most businesses and most use cases is certainly enough to get started and see, in fact, more than enough to get started and see what all is possible, and then you can make determinations. If you're syncing external databases and you have some huge external database, you can actually sync database views. Some of you may be familiar with that concept, some of you may not, but you can have your DB admin write a view that is some subset of a table, and then you can sync that view rather than syncing the whole table, and so that can help with record count management too. That's another strategy. If that's all gibberish, don't worry about it. I want you to know that even for like unique on-prem situations, a lot of this is still very possible to bring into the cloud and to work in this environment. I know I mentioned spreadsheets a couple times. Yes, if you have some master spreadsheet on your computer or on some user's computer that has important data, you can sync that spreadsheet. And then when changes are made to that spreadsheet, according to the sync schedule, they will come into analytics. You don't need to periodically even re-upload or anything like that. And so this is going to be a great way for businesses that have been working in spreadsheets or in other kind of offline files and have challenges with the lack of availability or the lack of consistency in that data. This can be a good starting point, right? I mean, ultimately, it's better to have that stuff in a CRM or some other cloud application for most businesses. But this can be a starting point to get your feet wet. If you're nervous about that change, if you feel like your business is not ready for that change, you can at least start to get the data into a cloud platform to use in certain circumstances. And then, like I said, you can keep data inside analytics as well. Another possibility, kind of a replacement for a Microsoft Access style tool. We, of course, can help you too. You should be in charge of your own business intelligence. Consultants shouldn't replace that functionality in your organization. You know what you need to know. You know what you want to know. You know what you're curious about. That said, we do have the expertise to help with the heavy lifting. So we can do things like detailed and customized training for your data and for your use case. We can help with the design of reports and dashboards. It may be that you feel like you don't have time to do a full build out of this stuff, and we can certainly help with that. We can write those SQL query tables for you if that's just not expertise that you have internally, and you want us as consultants to fill that role for you. We can definitely do that. We can help with the integration setup. We can build advanced formulas and help with the concept and the implementation of aggregation. We can do via keyword setup, which is that tuning I mentioned early on, where you can kind of set words to be aliases for other words so that your language-based searching is more natural. And then we can also just be a helping hand to get things started. If you're looking at this and you're saying today, wow, I really should bring something like this into my business, but I still just, one hour webinar is not enough. I need more. Of course, we're happy to help with that too. I'm quite passionate about getting businesses to use the data they have, and our whole team is kind of standing ready to help you and to make sure that you can use what you have, right, and get so much more out of the data that already exists for you. So that's what we're here to do and what we're here to help with, to empower you to gain insights from your business. And with all that in mind, at this point, we'll open for questions. If you have a question, you can certainly type in the Q&A. Yeah, let me know. What can I answer for you with a few minutes left here in our time together? If you're curious maybe about if analytics could work for you in a certain situation, we can't get too deep in an environment like this, but in general, I mean, certainly that's one thing we could talk about. Or if you're curious if it'll work with a certain application, certain kind of reporting. If not, that's fine too, of course. But I want to make sure that if you have any questions, that I'm able to answer them for you. Okay, well, not seeing any questions, I suppose we can wrap this up a few minutes early. You can, of course, if you have follow-up questions or want to talk one-on-one, you can find us online, AspenTech CRM. We have the contact form right there on the website, or some of you may have an existing relationship with us, and if that's the case, you can follow your usual channels, and we'll help you out either way. Definitely. It's been great to chat with you all. I hope you found this very helpful. I hope that you take something that you learned here today and go apply it and find something out about your business that you didn't know, and that is beneficial to you, right? And that we can continue to use what we have at our disposal to improve. I appreciate your time very much today, and don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. Thank you.